My name is Larissa, and we are going to practice together for about 15 minutes, just an opportunity to slow down a little bit. And we've been working with the Yamas. We'll be working with the 8 limbs of yoga for the rest of the year. But these Yamas, they're the first limb of the 8. And we've been spending a bit of time just focusing on the first 2. And those are the 2 that we can come back to again and again. If we're in doubt about something, we can always come back to that first practice of working with compassion or practicing with non-harming. And then that second one is working with truthfulness. And the way that I've heard that said the most simply is to love everyone, including yourself, and tell the truth. And such simple concepts. When we work with them in meditation, we're just noticing what comes up for us. Something like telling the truth to yourself. Sometimes we get caught in a loop of worry and it feels like the truth, but we're missing the groundedness of the present. And so we're missing part of the truthfulness, right? We're not talking about just not lying, but there's a lot involved when we look at these little concepts. So again, it's not about getting up into your mind and trying to figure everything out, but understanding the concepts can be helpful then to start to work with them, to start to practice with them. So with that in mind, we'll just settle into being to start with. So with those concepts, just allowing them to settle for a moment so that you can come into your body. And just noticing what parts of your body are touching the earth or touching a chair or something supporting you. And where do you feel some freedom of movement? Noticing your breath coming in and out. Maybe you're choosing to make some neck rolls, or you're stretching your upper body or your legs a bit. Just a reminder, there's no forcefulness. You don't need to come perfectly into stillness right away. Just checking in. So what does it feel like to be in my body this morning? Does my body have any needs? Can I make myself 5% more comfortable? Stabilizing in your body, just grounding yourself into your breath, noticing that subtle movement of breathing. It allows us to even notice the subtler space between breath, those little still moments. And as we notice that physically, we may start to notice that mentally as well. This little space between thoughts, just like there's a bit of space between breath. In that way, we're not trying to push our thoughts away or make our mind wrong. We're just creating a bit of spaciousness. It's noticing the space that is between thoughts. It's very often we have to look for that space. Otherwise, our brain just goes and goes and goes. Sometimes it does the opposite. It goes so quiet that we get a bit dull, a bit sleepy. And all of that is okay. Sometimes our mind feels it's going wild with following some future fantasy, whether it's excited or it's fearful. But our mind will just run. And when we can slow down and watch it, just like we're slowing down and watching our breath, so in that way, we begin to unhook a bit from when our mind is busy and distracted. Or we can awaken a bit when we're rather dull and sleepy, just by simply noticing again this rhythmic movement of breath, looking for these little spaces between breath. We can use our body as an anchor when we notice we're caught in a thought. We can also use that voice inside our mind to help support our thinking mind. When we're caught in a worry loop, maybe saying something to yourself like, not every thought I think is the truth. It's just a gentle reminder that thoughts just appear. Not all of them are fully true. Many thoughts are born out of fear or frustration, perhaps partially true. But just remembering, it's not every thought I think is the truth. So maybe this thought I'm thinking, maybe it's not set in stone. Maybe it can soften a bit. It's just breath by breath. Utilizing this gentle concentration practice so we can re-hone our attention back to breathing. And not because the thoughts we're thinking are not important, we're just practicing concentration first. So yeah, there's a thought. I was in the future for a moment. Here I am again, right here with my breath, back to the present. What does the space at the very top of my next inhale feel like? That fullness, my lungs expanded, ribs separated. And then as I exhale, I'm just watching my chest soften, the ribs start to come back together. And then noticing that space at the very bottom of this exhale. It's that emptiness. Perhaps noticing a heartbeat or two before I let my ribs expand again. Just watching how our body naturally expands and softens. Remembering too that our body naturally does this opening and closing. We don't need to be open all the time, nor is it helpful to be closed all the time. We can learn that wisdom just by watching this breath, expanding and contracting, opening and closing, breathing and softening. Practicing watching inhales and exhales, remembering both have equal value, that the opening of the inhale is not better than the closing of the exhale. That they work in symbiosis together. There's a reciprocity in breathing. And this helps us when we start to look at these concepts like non-harming. When we look at a practice like non-lying or non-stealing, we can sometimes get into a shameful moment when we think about what does it mean to steal or to lie or to cause harm. Our brain works well with taking action. So a lot of times looking at not taking action, we can get stuck a little bit in the suffering of the pain of lying, the pain of remembering when I took something. And it doesn't mean that we're remembering that we stole an item from somebody, but even just the taking from myself. We've all been in a situation where we're caught in our mind and we miss what a loved one is telling us. And we can get stuck in a bit of a shame about that. It's like, oh, I checked out. I always do that. I never listen. I'm not a good listener. But instead of getting caught on that shame side of it, we're looking at how do we practice instead of Asteya, which is non-stealing, we're practicing abundance. It's practicing working with generosity. We can observe the benefit of that concept of non-stealing, or to take only what is freely given, rather than getting stuck in non-stealing, non-stealing, non-stealing. Can we practice abundance with ourselves? So watching the abundance of breath. So we take in so many oxygen particles every time we breathe that we give back at least 80 to 90% of those oxygen particles. We take them in, our body takes only what it needs, and then it gives everything right back again. Just in its simplicity, watching our breath helps us start to understand that third yama, asteya, or non-stealing. So we're practicing abundance, we're practicing reciprocity every time we breathe in and out. And then in our mind, we're working with that non-stealing concept by honing our concentration. Many of us have been in that situation where we're maybe on our phone and we're reading news for longer than feels good, or we get stuck in a doom scroll cycle. And in that way, we're stealing our own time. We're stealing our own tenderness because we've just spent a bit too long. And you don't need to be down on yourself when you notice that excitement or perhaps even a celebration that you noticed. I noticed this thing that I'm doing is no longer helpful. I'm going to give myself back my own time by paying attention again to the present. How does my body feel? Just taking a moment throughout the day, just closing the lid of your laptop and taking 3 deep breaths. This is practicing Asteya. This is practicing abundance and generosity with yourself. We practice right here just by watching one breath at a time. These last moments, I'll share a quote, and I'll share this a few more times this week. We'll work with this for a while. And this is from Lao Tzu. This is from the Tao Te Ching, which is an Eastern text. And he says, be content with what you have. Rejoice in the way things are. When you realize there is nothing lacking, the whole world belongs to you. And within this phrase, there really is the true spirit of Asteya, this practice of only taking what is freely given, this practice of working with the concept of giving and receiving along with taking. Be content with what you have, rejoice in the way things are. That's not always easy. It's a practice because our mind says, yeah, but what about? But in this moment, just this curiosity, is there anything that I can rejoice in? That's a pretty big word. But just bringing it to the small level of contentment. Is there anything right here in my body that I can feel grateful for? And even when I don't feel particularly grateful, I'm just inviting in gratitude. I'm grateful that my body is supporting me. I'm grateful that my body is breathing for me. And just that curiosity, is there anything in this moment that I can appreciate? Then bring your hands into any of your closing habits or practices. And we'll end as we often do with loving kindness phrases. Just repeating these phrases back if they make sense for you. May I practice contentment today. May I seek and find contentment today. May I look for and remember abundance today. And when action is needed, may I choose to move with ease and peace. Take your time whenever you feel complete. Open your eyes, find a little movement. And as always, just taking a moment to thank yourself. Thank you, Sangha, community, for supporting each other.